My name is Justin Neff. I'm a transportation planner with DVRPC, which is the Philadelphia area MPO. The fact that I am neither a responder nor an EV expert, that irony is not lost on me, and the fact that I'm about to give a presentation about EVs and how they impact responders. But hopefully, as we go through this presentation, you'll see the role that DVRPC played in the development and the facilitation of this task force, and perhaps um, we'll encourage some agencies to look at perhaps non-traditional partners when tackling really any sort of challenge. So on the next slide, you'll see a very general overview of today's presentation, origin and purpose of the task force, some outcomes and resources to date, and then some next steps. And that should really say potential next steps, because this whole space there's certainly a lot of unknowns, and we're hoping to be adaptable to those changes as they come along. So on the next slide, to provide some context, DVRPC, we have the opportunity to facilitate 8 traffic incident management task forces within the Philadelphia region. It's 8 surrounding counties. If you see on the left, Montgomery County actually celebrates its 25th anniversary next week. So if you happen to be in Montco and you want to swing by, I think we even have free food. So that's a milestone that we're really excited about. And there's been a lot of individuals, a lot of agencies to get us there. And then even Mercer County, which is our newest, is coming up on 10 years. Regardless of the task force, if you look in the upper right, that's the general makeup. Those are our core participants, DOT, fire, towers, any entity, any agency that responds to a roadway. Those are the participants in the task forces. That can ebb and flow depending on what initiatives. Perhaps there's a construction project that really impacts road users that may bring in a different contingent, but those are our core members. And although topics may vary, the primary purpose of these task forces is to improve roadway safety for all users, absolutely for first responders, but also for the traveling public in general. That is, every initiative, every conversation is supporting that objective. Anyone who goes out on the roadway in any capacity comes home, whether they're traveling or whether they're going out there to do a job. That's the purpose of these task forces. And I really need to thank all the co-chairs. Each task force has a co-chair who is typically a responder within that county, and they really are fantastic stewards of really bringing what information that county is seeking, and what are some issues that the task force could help address. On the next slide, you'll see some of the topics that these task force cover: after action reviews, blocking procedures. Pre-COVID, we started to get some EV conversations going. And then when we came back from COVID, EVs became the conversation. It really did not matter what our agenda was. If somebody mentioned electric vehicles, that was the rest of our meeting. And it's very important to have those conversations and to ask questions and discuss unknowns and uncertainties. But what was starting to happen is we didn't have any answers, and that was unfortunate. And it became, I don't want to necessarily say directionless, because we were hearing about issues that responders were facing, but we weren't able to provide anything, and that was problematic, because we wanted the task force and the group to add value. So what was decided, and if you jump to the next slide, you'll see what we decided to do. And I want to pause here. I'm going to great lengths not to single out any individuals or any agencies, because if I do that, I'm going to miss someone. However, I'm going to single out Tony Correa. He is our Bucks County co-chair, and he is the one who really brought this idea to us. He saw that it was dominating the meetings, and he realized that there was an opportunity to dig deeper onto this topic, and he suggested, why don't we break it out? Why don't we have a separate group? So that's what we decided to do. And once that was decided, a lot of individuals and a lot of agencies helped to make it what it is, but he was the one who jump-started the idea. So the EV task force, very similar framework, similar members as our TIM task forces, um, but obviously EV focused. And so we have an EV task force. But if you see on the next slide, that's that's great. We have a task force. What does that mean? So what we had to do, we had a couple. Sorry, stick with now what for just a second, because it was important. We were starting from nothing, so we had some conversations with individuals who seemed to have some knowledge on this, outreach, see if they were interested in this. Um, I believe all of them said yes. Those who reached out to, they felt as though they could add value and there was value to this task force. And then we expanded it. Uh, we invited all task force members, and we ended up with roughly 50 to 60 individuals, about or a few dozen agencies from 2 states, uh, all willing to participate in this group. So if you jump to the next slide, and this is just a general overview of the task force. I couldn't find the perfect spot for this slide, but the group is very collaborative, voluntary. There's a lot of really smart people in this space where there's some unknowns, and that leads to some pretty spirited conversations. Uh, but that collaboration is key, not just within the task force itself, but with our partners. As people identify best practices, they try to share best practices. But also, one of those bullets is giving credit. So yes, we want to share information far and wide, but we also want to acknowledge those who have put forth the effort and really have done the lion's share of the work. And that's a balancing act, and one that I think any working group um, really strives to achieve. And I believe this group has done a fantastic job doing that. Um, so again, we have this group. Everyone's willing to work on something, but if you jump to the next slide, we needed to know, well, we're a task force. What is it? So collectively, it was decided that this is the mission statement. DVRPC's EV Task Force is a coalition of first responders and other related parties dedicated to improving outcomes of EV-related incidents on roadways in the Delaware Valley region. So in the same way that our TIM task forces, its primary purpose is responder and roadway user safety, this was to improve EV-related incidents on roadways. Lots of things we can do to support that, but that's our primary objective. And then the next slide goes into some of our goals that helps to support that. I would say, we've had varying degrees of success. Some we've been able to really sink our teeth into. Others, they're goals that we're working towards. And this is a never evolving group. So even where we have capacity may shift as well. So we had this mission statement, we had this task force, but there was still, what are we going to provide? How can we share this information? So on the next slide, you'll see what the task force has produced. And this was after discussion amongst the group and collaborating with some of our outside partners. It was decided to create an action checklist and then emergency operating best practices. And I hope I have this correct. Tony brought us a very general framework of a document from, I believe, Chicago, on how they were starting to look at EV incidents. And we used that as our jumping off point. And it became like a group project. We had a shared document, and all those members were making comments on it. They were suggesting this word over that word. Hey, let's change this font. And then the group was brought back together, and I say they because the facilitator at the time, unfortunately, she's no longer with DVRPC, but she was really the driving force of this, keeping everyone focused on the end goal. And it was, what do you think of this line? Or is everyone good with this? And if you're saying nothing, that means you're in agreement. And it was a very collaborative and iterative process. But ultimately, these two documents were produced. And if you go to the next slide, you're able to access them through these on the left and the right are QR codes to access these documents. And then the center is an EV resource page. And that's basically a very it's a website that DVRPC was able to stand up. And that's one of the opportunities or one of the tools that DVRPC was able to bring to the table. And anyone can access this. There's a member sign in, but then there's also a lot of information there for anyone who's interested, responder or otherwise. Please share this. If you find things that you disagree with, let us know. We're really not interested in being right. We're interested in getting it right. So we want this to be ever evolving. So, and I'll share this again at the end. I believe they put the link in the chat. So if you jump to the next slide, and I'm not going to get into the weeds of all this stuff. The next presentation, Kareem's going to show the interesting stuff, the fires, the more technical side of it. But I just want to briefly go over this. This first video of thermal runaway, and you can start to play this. This, I believe, is really what jump-started the group, is a concern for this, is once batteries, and here there's 6 of them, or maybe 7, but when you extrapolate that to 7,000 that are in a Tesla, this is a concern, and rightfully so. And the question became, how is this dealt with, and then what are the ripple effects of this sort of incident? And does that change when there's a different level of charge and a different type of battery, and are they all uniform? So again, Kareem's going to get into more of that aspect of it, but I really think it was this concept and concern that got the group going. Next slide shows just the weight. Weight is different. And this is important, not just for responders, but also those designing parking structures. So if you're putting a charging station on the roof of a parking garage, understand that the vehicles you're parking there are going to be heavier, and the load capacity changes. Next slide. Kareem's going to go into this as well. It just shows the basic layout of an EV. And then the next one provides an overview of the towers. So towers they're instrumental. They're vital for both our TIM task forces and the EV task force. An absolute wealth of knowledge. They are the ones who literally have their hands on this technology, but there's a lot of concern coming from that profession. From dispatch, perhaps not giving them the proper information, perhaps dispatch isn't aware, to the insurance issues of insurance sometimes refusing to take vehicles, and then who's stuck with them. And if tow yards need more space or they need to build structures to isolate them, is the township providing them with those ordinances? So towers heavily involved, and we hope to, we have some initiatives moving forward where we hope to really address this issue a bit more. And then the next slide shows, I mean, this is kind of emblematic of what towers are facing. He's looking at like, man, what do I do with this? Unfortunately, and this is not to in any way poke fun at the fire extinguisher, but that's sometimes what it feels like. They don't have the right tools for the technology that they're up against. And he's towing it in the right way on a flatbed, but once it catches or reignites, there's nothing that he could do in that moment. And then if you look at that off-gassing that's occurring, the next slide, and this is something that was in the documents, is air quality. And you'll see a question mark pops up because I have no idea. I have zero idea what these numbers mean. But our responders do, and they feel it's very important to share. So responders that typically respond to internal combustion engine vehicles and may understand the toxins that they're dealing with, well, this new technology brings a whole different set of chemical. I don't even really know how to put it, but this was information that needed to be shared and needs to be understood by anyone who deals with these types of vehicles. And then next slide, I think my question mark pops up, and then you can jump to the next one. So some general takeaways of the task force and really conversations that we've had. Sometimes, and I'll speak to me personally, I think, oh, well, everyone already understands this, and I need to remind myself that that is not the case. And even if the responder community might be understanding it, well, does the rest of the transportation profession? So we're trying to spread this information, longer incident duration, more different resources. Uh, Batteries can reignite, toxins embedded. And then that last one, the EVs are silent. That came up from some of our law enforcement partners. They train on using all their senses. Well, if they can't hear when an EV takes off, that may change their response. And actually, I was discussing EVs at um, a law enforcement meeting, and one of the SWAT members asked, "Well, where do I shoot it if I need to disable it?" I I didn't know that answer. So if anyone does know that, please let us know, and we'll pass that along. But it's a different if it's a different technology, and people need to become comfortable with the technology. So if you jump to the next slide, these are some of the current and ongoing initiatives. Really, number one is share and promote this information far and wide. As I said, I sometimes fall under the assumption that, well, I've been talking about this for 2 years. People must know it, and that's wrong. I need to um, continue to push it forward as much as possible. The group had the opportunity to meet with Department of Homeland Security. It was one of those cases where you assume that there's another agency that has it all covered and they're leaps and bounds ahead of everyone else. After the meeting, that is no longer the assumption. We've talked with townships about their parking garage ordinances, educating dispatchers. There's a number of our New Jersey partners who are doing a fantastic job of this, of getting this EV information into the hands of the dispatchers, so the dispatchers know what questions to ask when there's even the potential for it to be an EV. And then one pager for towers. We're hoping in early mid 2025 to have a quick informational page for towers to reference if they come across an EV. And then finally, where can the task force add value? Is there something that we feel, is almost the momentum is carrying us forward? Do we need to pivot to something else? And then technology is ever evolving. It's EVs now, but there's also hydrogen on the horizon. Or in some cases, already here. And then there's autonomy. And is the framework of this task force something that could be applied to um, other changes regardless of what it is? It's EVs now, but who knows what the next few years are going to bring. So that's the general overview. Again, if you're here for the fires and the really technical stuff, Kareem is going to get into that. But if you on the next slide, it's the QR code to our webpage. There's my contact information. I need to thank all the members of the task force. So I have the opportunity here to speak and take credit for the work that others have done. And kudos to all them. Again, it's entirely voluntary. Uh, we hope to partner with other professionals and share knowledge and best practices moving forward. So thank you, everyone.